Hi folks, my name is Warbass. Welcome back. Today is Friday, July 7th. It is the end of week 1 of Julive, the month-long project that I've embarked on to try and record as many live sets as possible to focus on improving the act of putting on an improvised live set with my pair of Eurorack synthesizers that you see behind me here. So this week, my goal was to initially get 6 live sets recorded, either half an hour or an hour, and then do a end of the week recap, critique video, this video about that week of performances. I managed to get 5 out of the 6 this week, mainly because I got a cold, which you might be able to hear in my voice still a little bit. I'm pretty happy with that given the circumstances, but instead of doing a kind of detailed pick apart of every moment that I liked or didn't like in the past sets, I thought it would be more useful to hone in on the set that I thought went the best and kind of do a DVD commentary style explanation of what's going on, both in the synthesizer, in my head, the parts that I liked, the parts that I didn't like, the struggles that I am still dealing with the way the performances are working out. And so that's this video. We're gonna do a little walkthrough. We'll pop over to YouTube literally, and you can see the past 5 sets are right here. If you haven't heard any of them, this is the first time you've ever come across my channel, welcome. I've been talking about my couple of synthesizers and how they've evolved quite a bit over the past maybe 4 months or so. But this month has been shifting completely into kind of performance and music making. Just kicking it off, I will start playing here the live set. Let me get my head further up and out of the way. So right off the bat, while this is kind of fading in and starting to build up, I'm gonna answer some of the kind of common questions that I got in the comments. One being, does the patch change from day to day? And the answer is a tiny bit. Maybe like 2 to 4 cables I'll move, maybe something that I thought I was going to use that I didn't use, or something I thought or realized there could be done better. I'll explain a couple of those probably in this video as I get to them. One of the things for this particular performance that was new was that microphone that you can see here. It's my Audio-Technica BP 4025, if I remember right. I think it's an XY stereo mic. It's patched into the Bafako instrument inputs on the A case. And the other common question, this will kind of merge together, is how much of the set is pre-prepared and how much is improv. And essentially for this set, as an example, I knew I wanted to do something with the mic because I hadn't yet this week. I tried out a little kid's glockenspiel xylophone, but it was way out of tune and it just sounded weird. I did one attempt at whistling. It sounded okay. So I cleared out that loop or that sample. I found a kick drum that I thought would fade well into the whistling. And then I started. So the initial patch is all patched up. I'm not doing any like live patching, but the looper is clear of the sample. I'm doing the whistling at the beginning of this video into the mic, grabbing that loop and then beginning to play it through the A case. And then I go over to the B case here and I'm beginning to fill out a drum pattern because I start with the drum sequencer, usually blank, in the 8 channels that I use to actually trigger audio sources. The channels 9 through 16 in the Ericsson drum sequencer I use for clocks, triggering envelopes of non-audio things, CV stuff. I don't usually clear those out, but I will clear the drum patterns out completely. So I'm building a brand new pattern. I'm essentially usually sound checking by picking a kit that I feel like starting with on the LXR. And for most of the sets, this one's kind of the one that broke the pattern. I started with drums. So this was a specific goal to start with something that isn't drums, which I decided was going to be whistling, and then fade in to a second piece. So I usually have a sense of what is the start going to be? What kind of element is it going to be? What's that initial goal? I work towards that. And once I'm there, I usually know that I'm going to go to a kind of B part. which is likely going to be kind of the opposite. So if I'm going to start really drum heavy, then my goal probably next is to go to somewhere kind of big and ambient and harmonic and droney. And then in this case, it was kind of reversed. So here I am beginning to bring up the amount of the 100 Grit signal that is being applied to the entire B case, which all of the audio B case goes through those 200 grits. And then my left hand right now is on the top row of the stereo matrix mixer in the A case, which controls the B case's audio going straight through to the end of the chain, through guillotine for another parallel distortion, through beads, and through panharmonium. Those are kind of the 4 columns in the stereo matrix mixer. And meanwhile, I'm kind of undoing some of the echo that I had on Starlab there for the beginning whistle. And again, the goal here is to kind of, at this point, my thought process through my head is that whistle's been going on for a long time. I need to get the drum pattern to a place where it can begin to take all the way over. The tension's still here between the two parts, and I need to elegantly release that tension and let the drums take over and get rid of the whistling and move on from it. So I'm trying to get the drums to sound how I want them to, the right amount of parallel distortion and filtering through the 100 grits. The mid-side parallel, I guess is the right way to say it. And just customize that a little bit. And here I am fading out that second row, which is how much of the looped B case goes through those same things, straight through the end of chain, beads, panharmonium, and guillotine. When I say end of chain, I mean Jumblehenge into Starlab, into Shackmount High Pass, into Librelegio, and then recorded on the 4MS wave recorder right here, which I just did a video about, which I can link there. Now that I've got the drums where I want them to be, I'm kind of coming back, beginning to kill out the whistling completely. And then what I'll do is actually, in a little bit, once I maybe apply the drums through panharmonium or tweak the signal, there I am disconnecting the mic from the instrument inputs, and instead having, or not disconnecting the mic, but taking the outputs of the instrument inputs and connecting them instead to my B case mult. So now I'm, instead of sampling the mic, I've got the looper sampling the B case itself. Clear out that loop, quickly take an unclocked random sample, because I'm gonna kind of make it weirdly grained with the looper. So it doesn't really matter that it's on beat, but what loop I grab, I just need some kind of snippet of audio from the thing I wanna mix that audio into so that it kind of comes in tune-ish. So I'll clear out the looper, take a quick clip, and then begin to mix that back in. And it's all kind of chopped up with the start point and loop length being decided by pressure points, because you can see looping through these different elements here, which is being clocked by one of those bottom 2 rows of the drum sequencer. So at this point, I'm trying to figure out how to get away from that drum pattern, because it's been going for a little while. And I want to bring in this other part, but I know this part's going to be a little chaotic sounding. Here it comes. And so I need to leave some room in the mix for it, both just like frequency-wise, volume-wise, and at like your own brain, how much you want to handle all these different elements. So often I will reach over to the B case and kill one of the channels on the Golden Master. They like remove the highs or remove lows depending on what frequencies I'm going to pull in from the looper. So sometimes I'll take a sample with the looper and turn the speed way up, and then I'll kill the high end from the B case and mix those two back together. So at this point, B case is now completely faded out. And those different moments you're hearing are super small loops on the looper. that are all being queued up and selected based on the knob positioning on pressure points. That thing that's the decay that's increasing, that element is beads, which is pitched way up, usually either a fifth, an octave, or 2 octaves, which I just eyeball for the fifth and the octave. And I'm kind of blurring it out a little bit. My goal here is to create a sound and a moment in the set that is really distinct and different from where I previously was. I think listening back to the majority of the sets, I think it's just kind of a byproduct of the way the cases are set up. There's kind of a trope to my live sets already that is, we go from heavy drums into big ambient thing, then back to heavy drums, back to big ambient thing. And the one, I think, biggest piece of feedback I have for myself already going through this is that there needs to be a third thing. I think that third thing is likely a melodic piece that's missing. In this entire set, Polygo-Go's over there going and ready. I've got triggers ready for it. It's being, quantized volt per octave from Clank Chaos. It's got modulation. It's going through the Zagreb filter. I believe in this set, I never actually bring it in because I didn't feel like I needed it in the set, and I don't know if I remembered tuning it before I started, so I was worried what note it was going to come in on. And I think it's maybe a showcase of how much you can do, kind of the royal you, how much I've been able to do without an oscillator, a traditional one, I guess, in this sense. But, that you could argue that the LXR is, 6 or 7 FM drum or drum synths, of course, or drum voices. But I don't have like a traditional oscillator. Everything else is taking an input sound and pushing it somewhere. I really, really like the tones, like that piece here that I just talked about the entire time talking over. I thought was a really, really nice destination from that drum part. It had a nice layering of elements. It was decently spread in terms of the harmony that it was pulling off. Just trying to see what I'm doing next. And I was actually pretty happy. I would probably let it go quite a bit longer if it was later in the set. But because I want to keep things moving, my goal is to then find a new drum sound that I like, cue that up, and bring it back in. So you can see I'm actually selecting the kit there, making sure morph is turned on, which I'll explain morph in the crossfader here in a second. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go. I've got a couple kits that I just prefer to go to, but I need more. I need them better organized on the LXR. But one of the things that I do as I'm moving into a new drum part is pick the kit that I want to fade into, choose the kit that I would morph that kit into next, and then ensure that the CV morphing is turned all the way up, and decide if I want any of that to be there at the beginning. So that crossfader on the far left of the B case here is really just right now acting as an attenuator for an envelope channel from Zadar, which is triggered by a channel on the drum sequencer to control how much the kit is morphed from the one kit to the next. So I can, with that crossfader and a combination of triggers, make it really chaotic, and the drum sounds changing between kits rapidly depending on what envelope I have picked and what modulation pattern I have on the Zadar. But the crossfader makes it really nice because you can flick that all the way to the left super fast and remove that, or flick it all the way back to the right and make it super crazy and bring it back out. So it's really just a super fast attenuator in this current patch. I do think the better organizing of the kits in the LXR and some more prep would help a lot, because I think one of the most anxiety-driven moments when I'm actually playing is what are the drums going to sound like when I bring them in, because I have kits that I like that I've tweaked and edited a little bit, but I don't necessarily know if they're going to be like in key, that the note that kick drum is with what the A case has mangled previously. hear that kind of tone or hum is, I believe, a bunch of the B case's signal being grabbed by panharmonium and blurred way out. And that increase in gain right there was actually pulling panharmonium out of the guillotine mix, so there's more room for the LXR to go through it in the B case essentially. This trick right here, I have one of the tweaks I made this week to the patch was to change, didn't want to talk over that because it's one of my favorite parts of the set. One of the tweaks I made to the patch just for this set was taking panharmonium and removing it from going into Jumblehenge. It was kind of a low end frequency on Jumblehenge, and instead bringing it back up into the matrix mixer so that I could put it through guillotine. And so what that did was open up really the entire bottom of Jumblehenge. I now just have 2 stereo pairs in Jumblehenge, and Jumblehenge is great for the A case, especially by itself. And I hadn't used it a ton in this dual case kind of setup. But what I realized when I actually realized it live was, since I had the bottom frequencies open on Jumblehenge, what I kind of created was a high pass filter, but is really a series of bandpass filters that I could grab that knob at the bottom of and turn up. So the trick I was doing there was I was turning up the filter impact of Jumblehenge, removing the 100 grits on the dry wet of a crossfader on WMD's axis. And here I'm doing it again. And then there was bringing the 100 grits all the way back in. And if I throw that CV, or not CV knob, the filter knob on Jumblehenge back down, then all of the filters at Jumblehenge are off, and that filtering based on where the jacks are is no longer being applied, and you get that full sound again. So it makes it this nice kind of thing. So you can see that bottom here is completely empty. I think the whole mix is going into those 2, and beads is coming into those. It's not really being used that much. Jumblehenge is one of my favorite mixer concepts and modules, but is really great for the A case by itself. For the 2 cases, it plays a less of a role, except for this little high pass trick. So there was me playing with a different kit, that crossfader. Again, the crossfader itself isn't how much the next kit is being morphed to, it's how much of the envelope is being applied to morphing the next kit. So I have another element to do that morphing, which is adding more triggers to that envelope on the drum sequencer. Sometimes I'll just do one randomly. Sometimes I will slowly add more and more until the envelope is almost going constantly, and then throw the crossfader all the way across, and that really makes the drum pattern sound much more dynamic. So that top knob of WMD axis is a dry wet between signal through the 100 grits and signal not through the 100 grits. So it's a parallel distortion and filter in the B case, and then since I have guillotine on the stereo matrix mixer, there's a parallel stereo distortion in the A case as well. Now I believe I'm bringing in beads and panharmonium on the live signal. I think I probably just overshot it, and so I pulled it back out. Yeah. I do that a couple times in this set where I bring something in and it wasn't exactly right, so I kind of pull it back out, try and reset, and bring it back in again. So now this is another grabbed loop from the looper. What I did just there was change the trigger pattern on the drum sequencer for the channel that clocks pressure points. So now you can see the little LED is moving at a kind of unsteady rhythm. Instead of just being on quarter notes, now that is kind of adding another element to it. That's a nice thing about pressure points, is that it's not actually, or I guess the nice thing about Brain's module and pressure points is it doesn't actually need a clock. It's just a trigger to move to the next channel. So you can play it and add as much dynamics to it as you want. That second row of pressure points controls the length of the loop, so that can be different for each column. So what I did there was go from having all of the loops as small as possible to open just a tiny bit. So it adds a little more of like a to it instead of such a tone, which like loosens things quite a bit and makes things a little bit more messy. Starlab is incredibly nice. Every once in a while I get on a kick where I want to get rid of it because it's such a big reverb and replace it with like the bat verb or something else. But there's so many performance elements to it that I feel like I would lose out on. Throwing the echo on, cranking the feedback, and getting the delay so short that it gets into car plus territory without actually turning on the car plus mode. Making the internal LFO a square wave and clocking it to the filter at a really high speed and slowing that down, bringing in the shimmer, bringing out the shimmer, the low damp to it, the independent decay. Like, there's so much that when I'm in front of the A case, so much of Starlab is hands-on for me, and it ends up being worth the space every time I think about it. Usually what I'm trying to do on the A case is take the sounds that are in the looper, put them through beads and panharmonium at different frequency ranges. So beads often plays a higher pitch because I just think it sounds better. Where panharmonium is often I'm pitching it down, not all the time, but often pitching it down, and then letting the original loop also play through, mix those elements together, and then add some crazy reverb and delay. And then, of course, guillotine is such a kind of core element now as well. But all of those modules are very hands-on of how you want the reverb on beads or the octave or waveform on panharmonium. All those things I'm kind of leaning into and messing with quite a lot. One of the things I didn't even realize myself do here as I was talking, I had unplugged the clock that goes into brains right there, so that I could just play the pressure points slowly, however I felt like, so I could kind of key out a pattern and then just plug it back in. So that white patch cable comes all the way over. I think it's probably this one. That might be a gray one. It's probably coming up right over there for one of the last channels on the drum sequencer. Sometimes if I'm extra nervous about what a new kit or drum element is going to sound like coming into or leaving a droney space and going back to kind of an industrial drum space, I'll do this, what I'm doing right now, which is bring in a higher end of the drum element first, bring in some hats instead of starting with the kick, because I feel like it's more forgiving and it lets you set up almost the room that the drum element is going to be in. If I introduce the hi-hats, introduce a snare, maybe introduce a tom, when the kick comes in, it's going to have some friends that it can gel with nicely, even if that kick doesn't necessarily gel with the kind of ambient drone thing that I'm leaving. If I did that in the opposite way, the kick is also often the most abrasive element in the room. So if it doesn't get along with what the A case is doing, it becomes really obvious. So here I tested a kit with some high end, faded that back down, brought in a little bit of the kick, but I'm teasing it by, I believe I'm having, I can't exactly tell, but I believe the low frequency section of Golden Master is disabled right there. So I'm giving a tease of that kick without actually having to have it take up the entire mix and try to deliver on some kind of drop, which this little drop coming up here in a little bit, I actually screw up. So again, I'm kind of setting a little bit more of the stage for this drum piece, a clap, a snare. Trying to get some of the B case through guillotine, which is that top right knob on the matrix mixer, turning down, excuse me, turning down fully the A case's signal through the end of chain. Now, in my head, that was going to be the good drop, and it wasn't. It didn't deliver on what I thought. So here I go back to my trick that I learned essentially earlier in this exact performance. Let's pull out of the 100 grits. Let's crank the filters up on Jumblehenge because I've got nothing in that low end of Jumblehenge. So we're going to essentially high pass the whole mix with no distortion and redo it. So one of the things that I know I should do and figure out is a better monitoring system. So I use the Bafako Out V3, which has a Q out, but again, that's over here. And I also don't have right now a module to easily route any old thing over to it. So I, felt that kind of drop didn't deliver on the expectation that had been set leading into it. So I just pulled further away, fixed the thing that I figured was wrong with it, which was, I think, the amount of distortion was too high on the A case. I can't remember exactly what I did. And then bring it back in more fully with the 100 grits and the Jumblehenge. So there I'm clearing the loop out, taking a new loop. So now the B case has a locked loop into the looper with no input signal being passed through it, so the looper's just doing its own thing. I reset some of the positions that look like they're on the pressure points, and I'm going to fade some of that signal you hear is that chopped up loop of the A case looper, and I'm going to bring that back in, which kind of sounds like another percussive element. I mean, given it is sampled percussion. But if I turn down some of these loop lengths, they can get closer to kind of tones, which is what I did there. I just kind of tweaked that second row, which is that looper's loop length. Forgot the other thing I have going on here is a little bit of white noise that's super attenuated, controlling the loop speed. So the speed of looper is just really wobbly the whole time too, which was initially just for the whistling, but I don't think I completely pulled it out or like attenuated it all the way down. I think I'm going to lower the speed here. So that's just the speed knob of the left deck, because again, I'm running the intro looper in stereo mode, so the decks are linked, so I only really need to touch the left half of it, which to me is the best way to do a stereo module. If you're a manufacturer thinking about doing a dual channel module that essentially could be stereo, have a link switch. It works really, really well on that looper. That element is panharmonium, where beads is more of that higher end, smeared, more toothy wave, because I think the panharmonium is doing sine waves right now. So my left hand there is on the Golden Masters mute switches for the different frequency ranges, so I can bring back in just the low end. Now I think some mids or highs there of that drum pattern that was still going. So what I'm doing here is not something I normally did this week, but I think I was trying to specifically do something different, which is I brought back in the same drum part. When I left its kind of sampled mangled version instead of bringing in a new drum part. And now in just the B case, I'm trying to transform it into a new drum part. So my left hand's on that crossfader. I'm really trying to apply a lot of the envelope modulation from Zadar to that more feature of the LXR, which you can hear in all of the drum sounds kind of transforming. The joystick on my left hand's on right now is in XY controlling the cutoffs for the 200 grits. So the vertical axis is the cutoff for the mid 100 grit and the horizontal is the side. Most of the time it is along the far right of its travel and I'm moving it up and down, but I'll sometimes bring it into the middle, bring it back out. One of the channels of the Lapsus, I think it's this third channel here, is the resonance of those 200 grits with the CV control of that resonance or CV attenuation of the resonance much higher on the mid one. So there's a lot more resonance on the mid filter, which can help if I bring the joystick way down so that cutoff the mid filter is low. Meanwhile, the side filter is wide open, but the mid filter is super low with the super high resonance, and it can catch the kick drum's frequency and really boom at certain times if I got the right kick drum and also the right knob position on the cutoff. A lot of live drum pattern changes. Again, I don't have like saved banks of drum patterns on the drum sequencer. You can obviously do that and like have things queued up. I literally just mute things, unmute things, and live change the pattern. That's one of the other reasons why I haven't bothered to try and revisit to figure out how well accents can work, because I need the single key press to remove steps and add steps back in, and the double key press on the drum sequencer to do accent triggers would probably throw me off. Probably could get there with practice, but it's fine as is right now. So that crossfader again, you can see how it's extremely playable, especially on the position that it is on the case, because my hand can kind of grab the side of the case and really just flick it back and forth. It's a really fast, low friction fader, but it makes it really nice to just kick it over, have the drums completely sound different, kick it back. I'm a sucker for the little brass knobs on the 100 grits, especially since they're right next to each other. Bridging across the 200 grits with my thumb is also great for some serious kind of squealing and noisiness. So at this point, I'm beyond the 30 minutes that I initially planned. And that's because off screen at the desk I'm sitting at, which is, I guess, behind the camera right now, I have my laptop open with the screen extremely dim and a black background timer clock, which I guess I can put a link to. I just found it on somebody's GitHub that just shows minutes and seconds, and you can turn it on with a space bar. And I will every once in a while look up to see where I'm at on the timer, because again, I could check the camera's clock, but the camera's spinning around all the time, so it's not always in a place where I can see it. But here, I said started playing and actually got into that first drum part before I realized I hadn't set my timer clock yet. I hadn't actually started it. So I started the timer about 5 minutes late, which is why this set ended up being 35 minutes instead of half an hour. But as I see that clock move, I'm trying to keep track of how long have I been doing the thing I'm currently doing. Is it getting stale potentially? I have a sense of, is it getting stale for me, but more objectively, is it getting stale because it's actually been going for a while? And then also, how close am I to an end time? And what do I need to do to kind of make that end somewhat elegant, or at least sound on purpose? So I don't want it to just have to cut off. So if I see I've got like a minute left or 2 minutes left, I will likely transition into the A case, bring the dry wet on Starlab way up, bring the wet on Starlab way up, bring the dry on Starlab further down instead of the inverse, and really start to try and resolve some of the things that I had been doing. In this case, I think that note right there, it gets a little darker than I meant it to. That was an accident, but I really like the tension and push and pull between these super heavy drum elements and the breath of not fresh air, but stretched out ambient droning harmonic elements that the A case can bring. And because the A case is really meant for sample mangling whatever's into it, whether it's a mic into it or literally an entire other case, those two things work pretty well in tandem. And it also is nice to kind of come back to my home base, which is the A case, really, and try and just let something play out slowly and end on a note of more comfort than the B case would, I guess. As that plays out, that's it. I guess tomorrow I'll hopefully see you again with another maybe 30-minute set, maybe hour. Maybe I'll get a cold again. I'm going to try to do another 5 or 6 sets this week. I'm not sure how similar they will be to this past week's. Likely I'm going to try and build on some of those things. I think I mentioned bringing in a little bit more of the melodic elements instead of just kind of drums and ambience. I'm probably going to lean on polygo quite a bit more. Maybe I will pitch CV beads and panharmonium from Clank Chaos too. Not sure yet. But again, the goal of this whole month is to just show some progress to really myself in what it means to have a set of cases, a patch approach, not necessarily only one patch, but there's definitely like a consistent element here, and be able to, with confidence, know I can improvise like a legitimate half-hour or hour-long set that I'd be proud of, that I would want to hear, and that it delivers on executing the things that I intended to. I don't think this is everyone's style or the thing that everyone wants to listen to. Everyone's got their tastes. But there's one thing of it sounding good or bad, and another thing of it sounding like I wanted it to sound, which this battle is half sounding. Right now it's focused on, does it sound like I want it to sound? Am I able to make it do the things that I want it to do? Do I have control when I want it? And is it being the kind of composition partner that Modular can be when I don't want it? So that's it. If you made it to the end, thanks so much. If you wanted to hear a version of the set without me yapping over it the whole time, I'll put a link here and in the description. And if you have been listening to the sets this week or had listened to them before, thank you for that. I know it's kind of weird when someone talks about gear or music process a lot and then suddenly throws a whole bunch of just music at you. YouTube's not always the best spot for that, but it's the the main goal for this space, just to kind of improve as a musician and do that in public. And I think this is the best, most authentic way that I can go about that. So see you tomorrow, hopefully, if I can get this uploaded tonight, and have another one tomorrow and do the same thing again the next day and the next day and the next day, and then maybe take a break in August for a little bit. Peace.